What started out as a ride from Compiègne to Roubaix in the pouring rain turned into one of the most epic battles on the Hell of the North. From Colbrelli winning for Italy for the first time since '99 to Wout van Aert's struggles after the Arenberg. I'm James Talksport, and I'm here to talk you through the 118th Paris Roubaix. Started, as you'd expect, in lovely, lovely rain. Big breakaway, Luke Rowe and Moscon for Ineos, Van Avermaet for Age Desert, and three Jumbo riders, a couple of quick-step riders, including Ballerini and Florian Vermeersch, to name but a few of the 30-strong breakaway. Never got more than a couple of minutes, but there we go. Riders were crashing left, right, and centre as normal on the cobbles. Stefan Kung had about three. Sagan had a bad one before the Arenberg, and he finished luckily, but there we go. So the race really sort of took shape before the Arenberg. You had Van der Poel, Van Aert, Asgreen, and the rest of his quick-step team all at the front. Of the peloton chasing the breakaway, who had split into groups as well, with originally Volscheid and Rowe with Vermeersch and Ekov from DSM. That sort of split up early on, and then they hit the Arenberg. Those two stayed away, and the peloton, well, you can call it the peloton if it's 20 riders, really split on the Arenberg. You had Van der Poel on the front, putting in something of a move. Quick Step disintegrated. Van Aert was caught up behind stuff. Pedersen was taken out by Luke Rowe, who had either lost his footing or had just crashed and then crashed again. Van Aert did, and Stibar did, and Lampard and co did eventually get back on, but it was a telltale sign that it maybe wouldn't have been their day. After the Arenberg, it was sort of a waiting game until Sonny Colbrelli and a few riders, including Boivin from Israel, went out onto the attack, and that really set up the rest of the race, certainly for Sonny Colbrelli, I think. So after that, you had Van der Poel attack hard after a mechanical with his teammates on the front, slowing things down. Originally, he had Lampard with him, but then Lampard went boom, and Van der Poel very quickly came up to Colbrelli. Now, Colbrelli could have worked hard with him to establish that gap, and then but he decided to pull softer, shorter turns, which is understandable when Van der Poel is on one of his Van der Poel type days. All while this was still going on, Gianni Moscon on the sector of Orchies decided, or Bercy, yep, it was Bercy, decided to push on alone. Van der Poel the gap at the end of Maison-Pavel sort of extended from around 40 seconds to a minute and 20. The Van Aert group behind weren't a million miles away from Van der Poel either. So it all looked as though it would pretty much be a Moscon time trial versus Colbrelli, who maybe had been playing the Italian card, I don't know. And Van der Poel with the rest of the guys. However, with 30k to go, Moscon had a puncture, and then on the next sector he had a crash, and that sort of the bike change, his tyre pressure was clearly a bit too high, and ultimately led to the breakaway catching him on the Carrefour. Van der Poel dropped the Israel guys, but couldn't get rid of Colbrelli, and also couldn't get rid of early brakeman Florian Vermeersch, who after the Carrefour on Gruson actually looked the strongest. They all stayed together to the finish, and we were treated to one of the best sprints at the end of Roubaix ever. In the rain, in the mud, Sonny Colbrelli, as I said in the preview, took the first win for Italy since 1999. They've had Balan, who's done reasonably well, but apart from that, they've not really had anyone. And now they've got two guys in Moscon who finished fourth, and Colbrelli who took the win. Florian Vermeersch in second place stole a march on the other two to in the sprint with a couple 100 meters to go and really set himself up to beat Van der Poel in the sprint. At the end of the day, Van der Poel just probably did too much work to where his fitness was, and still third place, third of three debutants of the podium is not bad at all. So that's the action. Colbrelli, Vermeersch, Van der Poel, Moscon, and then a group behind. Let's take a look at my reaction and thoughts of the race itself. So we'll start with we'll call them disappointments, but you can't say that too much. Jumbo-Visma and Wout van Aert and De Koning Quick-Step. It was very obvious before the Arenberg that Wout van Aert was maybe on for a good day, but as soon as they hit the Arenberg, he began to sort of not implode, but certainly lost a lot of matches by then. He did make a move to push the pace a little bit in the Holvey sector, so maybe that was a factor, but it certainly proved that maybe he wasn't going to be on the best day. Quick Step, you had the typical numbers, Asgreen, Lampard and Stibar. By the end of the Arenberg as well, Stibar was the only one there. Lampard and Asgreen were out the back, although Lampard did eventually get back on and try and follow Van der Poel's attack. On to the rest of the riders. Good days for Israel. They had Sepp van Mark was up there, but crashing and mechanicals. But they had Tom van Arsbroek and Guillaume Bouvin fighting it out for the top 10. Fantastic day for them and Israel. Christophe Laporte went from having no rear brake to finishing in the top 10. And then obviously the big three debutants on the podium had very good days as well. Side note on Moscon, he obviously his last race for Ineos was 30k from winning. I think he possibly would have. I think the group behind him just started playing and looking at each other, especially as they couldn't drop each other. But this time for Ineos, it was bad luck. It's got to come, them winning a cobbled monument, surely. Trek didn't have a great day, although Pedersen was on Van der Poel's wheel until Luke Rowe moved across on the Arenberg. So let's talk now separately about each of the three on the podium. And I'll start with Mathieu van der Poel, who finished in third place. If you were to tell him probably about a month ago that he would finish 8th in the World Championships and finish third after decimating the field at Roubaix, a wet Roubaix, he would have probably bitten your hand off and said, "Oh, I'll take that." You saw at the end of the race that he, as he always does, had put everything into it. As you saw, he was aggressive. He was the only one working hard on the front of that chase group behind Moscon. Ultimately, that probably paid him in the sprint, but for where his form and condition is after the injury and then after the World Championships, this should eventually feel like a win for him. He was a bike length away from winning Roubaix after a dodgy back. So, not bad at all. He will be hard to beat in the years to come, that's for sure. Another debut podium, in fact, his first podium in a bike race for Florian Vermeersch. What more can you say? The last wet Roubaix had Tom Bonen on the podium, another Belgian, and look what career he had. I'm not going to say Florian will have the same career, but it's a good omen. I think Lotto Soudal should look to build a classics team around him for next year, as alongside the sprinter Caleb Ewan. Um, and hey, first year podium at Roubaix, you couldn't really ask for more. It's very similar to Casper Asgreen and Mads Pedersen when they podiumed at Flanders at their first attempt as well. Ride of the year. And well, let's talk about another win for the Italians. Eurovision, the what else? Euros in football. They've won the World TT. They've won the. Um, I can't count how much they've won this year. So we really shouldn't be surprised. 2021 seems to be the year for the Azzurri. Sonny Colbrelli himself has pretty much looked one of the best riders in the world since the Tour on different types of terrain. He was up there at the World Championships, just followed the wrong people. Remco couldn't drop him at the Europeans. He won the Benelux Tour, and now he has won easily the biggest win of his career. He never looked in trouble on the cobbles following Van der Poel. And yes, I do think there has to be a thing with Van der Poel's fitness, and Van der Poel is naturally better on them. But on the day, Sonny Colbrelli was on par, if not a fraction better on them than Mathieu van der Poel. He took shorter turns, so tactically he was aware that Van der Poel would at some point probably try and drop him, and he was the first to react, more importantly, to the sprint of Florian Vermeersch inside the velodrome. That meant he was in behind the wheel, whereas Van der Poel had to go around when they were in the three in the line. So, Italy, congratulations. Sonny Colbrelli, congratulations. It's been a hell of a year for Bahrain. Mohoric has done well. Haig, Gino Maeda, Dylan Turns, and yeah, fair play to Bahrain. They've got it right this year. Also, Marco Haller was up there in the break, and Hausler was up there in the top 15 as well. So there we have it. Thank you very much for watching my Roubaix review. It was a hell of a race. I would love to have more wet Paris Roubaix. I would. I don't think the pros, apart from Van der Poel, would agree, but there we go. Next, I guess, will probably be a preview show of the cyclocross season, and maybe a Lombardia as well, if I remember. But then I'll also do a review either on here or on my website about the season, the road season as a whole, and look ahead to 2022. Thank you and goodbye.